Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and we're going to have a great time making a gorgeous handmade leather project. But we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to break this up into segments because we're going to concentrate a little bit less on the project and a little bit more on the tools or materials or products out there to help us with our project. The big point of this video, we don't have to be creative. We don't have to be artistic or even mechanically inclined to create stunning projects. There's all kinds of tools out there just waiting to step in and help us out. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to our website. But also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So segment one, let's step over here. We're going to work on the pattern for our main body. We typically look at our patterns in digital form. We can pause, take notes, take measurements. We're going to go absolutely from scratch. And this is the project we're going to work on. Just a simple belt pouch. But we're going to go this route for a couple of reasons. First off, this is going to cover every step in the average project. But also, we're going to do some wet forming on our pouch. Now on the design, I can't tell which I love more. The tribal with this heart, very cool, but also I love the feathers. Now we're going with one or both because these are both very simple projects or very simple tooling. If we want to step into tooling or we want to get a start, they're going to look good our first time out. We're going to probably do both or at least design both. Pick whatever way you want to go. So for our tools, cheap poster board, one of the biggest helps in my shop. If I'm not happy with my design, toss it. I'm really not out anything, but it actually can make a pretty, I wouldn't say a decent pattern, but it works. Now, I'll make my pattern out of this. If everything fits, when I get my project together, if everything fits, I'm going to jump over to our pattern sheeting. This makes a great pattern. It's easy to cut, it's easy to mark, but it's durable. Again, that makes a great pattern. All right, so on our poster board, typically these are cut with a big guillotine press. So these are typically absolutely square. Well, yes and no, but with this is a smaller piece I've cut from a larger piece, and this is our actual corner. So I'm pretty sure this is square, but let's double check. Looks good. Our square, already starting to come in handy. All right, so our pouch, our main body piece is going to be 6.5 by 8.5 or 16.5 centimeters by 21.5, give or take. So let's draw in a 6.5 by 8.5 inch box. Good. We're going to use a pencil here. I'm going to come back and draw this in with pen so we can see what we're doing, and I'm going to get that all over me. It is what it is. Okay, so for our main body, we're going to come in 4.5 inches or about 11.5 centimeters from one end or the other. So let's do that. 4.5, let's make a mark. Same on this side. Now we can always use our square, but I tend to like to use my marks and then square to my edge. Yeah, that looks good. Now, this is going to be a bend. This is going to be the start of our back bend or the bend on the back. So let's just mark this in a broken line. Good. Now, the front side of that bend, let's give this a full inch there. Great thing about this, 1.5 inch wide, 1 inch wide, our two standard belt and strap widths. So instead of measuring this out, I can just butt that right there, and let's draw another broken line. So that's our bend. I prefer not to do any tooling on our bend because it's going to back out on us, but no problem there on this design. Okay, we've got that. Now, next, I want a little bit of distance between the end of my bend and the start of my curve. So let's give that 1 inch. Now, we don't really need a broken line there. Let's just mark 1 inch on either side. Okay, now we need a center line because what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in half. Then we're going to cut our pouch. It makes it very easy, but also very symmetrical. There's our center line, but let's do this. Let's take our awl. Again, a big help for marking holes particularly. But let's just scribe this. Now, we don't want to go too hard with the cheap poster board, but we're going to scribe that just like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to come back in and draw this in pen. And again, the pen makes me nuts. All right, we're going to drop in a snap right here on our flap. We'll drop this mark in later because that can change depending on the weights of leather we use, but that's easy enough to do. So on our center line, let's come in 3/4 of an inch and circle that. All right, so let's cut this out. Now, plywood, I cut on this for years and years. It's not great, but it'll work. But we're going to look at another option for our cutting surface when we jump over to cut our leather. So let's cut this out. Good, there we go. Okay, now we've got our line scribed in the center. So let's fold this on that line. And flatten that with our knife. Good, we're pretty close. Good measurements there. Now, for round corners, we have got all kinds of great options. I love our French curves, and I use these on most every project. We could simply drop these in. Let's flip that around. There we go. So that would give us a very even curve down to our point. We can absolutely go that way. Funny thing, our shop is full of rounds. So like right here, I could just use my glue bottle and drop in a round. Easy enough, right? So all kinds of options there in templates too. I love templates. I've got a big bag of these. I've got rounds, ovals, all kinds of templates. Those are a big help. All right, let's do this. So we're gonna cut this at an angle. We can absolutely, let's pull this over here. Yeah, we can always just go flat. Let's see, I don't have that option, but I like this little point. Plus it makes it very easy to grab that snap, okay? So we've got our mark from 1 inch. Now I'm bad about doing this. Let's make sure we mark from the outside away from the bend. If we mark from the inside, and I've done this so many times, we're actually gonna have a V and not a point. But let's drop this in, non-slip tape down, and let's cut from that mark right to the center. Easy enough. Okay, let's take a round. And all I'm going to do here, let's see, this looks to be about, let's come up to maybe 1 3/4 inch. That's a nice, smooth curve there. Let's draw that in. And you notice too, we're going to do this cut before we cut, or before we flip this back open, because that's going to, again, be perfectly symmetrical. We'll cut this once we do open that. Nice round corner there. Very cool. How easy is that? Now down here, let's do the same thing, but let's back up maybe to, let's say, a 1 inch round. And let's cut that out. And trim a little bit. That looks good thus far. Very cool. Okay, we'll come back to this. So let's jump over. This is our pocket. And you notice I've been cleaning my pen on this. Probably not the best idea. The point here is we're not going to cut this to size because we're going to add 1 inch to all 3 sides, everything but the throat, so that we have room. In fact, there's one of our molds. We have room to press this down and to work it. So all I'm going to do here is just roughly maybe 5 by 8.5. Again, about 1 inch on 3 sides of this. So we don't really need to create more of a pattern there. Let's set that aside. Now, belt loops. We're going to add some belt loops. Let's make this a belt pouch. So we're going to go 1 inch wide by 6 inches long. Now we're going to change this up a little bit. Notice I've just got a single rivet there. Well, over time, that's going to get loose and it's going to do that. Well, let's drop in a second rivet. It's going to keep that from happening. So let's draw in a box, 1 inch by 6 inches. And let's add a center line to that. That looks good. All right, so we're going to work, let's start from this end. So we're going to come in 1/2 of an inch for our first rivet. Let's do 3/4 to our second rivet. On this end, let's come in 1/2 of an inch. So down here, this will be the outside. We're going to add a round into that, but in all honesty, a round in on both ends really looks nice, and we don't get confused. So let's draw that in, cut this piece out. Good. Now on our main body, let's come down 3/4, well, let's back up, sorry. Let's come in from the side. Now notice on this, these belt loops, they're a little far out. The point here is that if somebody's going to wear this on their side, then if these are too far out, it's going to want to bend the pouch around. So let's get these a little bit closer in. Let's come in 1.5 inches from either side. Very nice. Now, from our top, let's come down about 1/2 of an inch, then our 3/4, and then from our bottom, let's come in 3/4 of an inch. We're just giving that a little extra room down here at the bottom so our strap doesn't hang off the bottom of the pouch. So that's all we're doing here. But your dimensions, absolutely go with any dimensions you want. So 1/2, 3/4, and 1/2 from the bottom. I'm going to circle these in and pin. Okay, last step. Let's fold this back over. We're going to add some round corners down here. That's going to be a nice touch. So let's go back to about our 1 3/4, or I think that's about 4.5 centimeters. Let's drop that in. There we go. Let's draw that, and now let's cut that out. All right, we have got a good looking pattern, symmetrical. How easy is this when we use our tools? Okay, let's step over to our main table, start cutting some leather. Just like every other step in leathercraft, we have got all kinds of options to help us out. Even duct tape is going to jump in and help. So let's start right here. Our square, we've already seen the value of this, but that non-slip tape, now that we're going to jump over to cutting leather, that's going to make all the difference. And this has probably happened to you. So let's say we're using a square that doesn't have the tape on it. Let's see if we can cut a parallel line to this edge. Look at that. Notice how that faded. What a pain that is. So let's do this. Let's flip this over. I'm going to apply half the pressure that I was applying. Perfect cut every time. So again, that's about the best trick I can toss out there. Now, for cutting edges, or for straight edges, this is called bar stock. Again, we talked about this, but there's a big point here, and I want to bring this up. Notice this is relatively thick. We can get this at any hardware store, and we can get this in multiple widths. Say we've drawn our pattern in. We don't need to measure. Well, this makes a good cutting edge for this reason. This is good and thick. Now, I bring this up only because this has happened to me. If you've ever seen one of those paper-thin rulers, we're trying to use one of those. What's going to happen is as we're cutting along, our blade's going to jump that edge. Guess where it's going to stop? Right in our thumb. It's happened to me. I don't want that to ever happen again. So therefore, that height, very good. That's about 1/8 of an inch. And then I've added our non-slip tape on both sides. One to grip the leather and one for me. But again, super easy to do. But also, let's try to keep that from happening. First off with our height here. But secondly, let's keep that blade angle low. And if we do, good straight cut every time. So we've got some good options here. Now, on our cutting surfaces, like I said, I love the plywood. Used it for years. It's great for a couple reasons. First off, inexpensive. And at a hardware store, we can get just about any cut. But what I typically find out, say if I'm working on my plywood, I'll chew up this side. Well, let's just flip this around. So now we've got a clean side to work on. When that side is done, let's flip it over. Now we've got 2 more surfaces. So it's very economical, not terribly durable, but it's absolutely going to work. Now, this is our poly cutting board. I love these, but I tend to reserve this more for my chisel, my round holes, my end punches, because this is not going to tear up my tool. But also, it's a little bit smaller. So for larger projects, it's harder to cut on these. But right here, our poundo board. It's a rehealable surface. What I love about this is as we cut, our blade's going to sink down into this surface just a little bit. So again, we get a very square cut. Now on this is a little bit slick. So if we put this on our table, it's going to move around while we cut. That is very frustrating. So how about a little duct tape? We put a little loop of that on the back of our board. Look at that. That will not move, but it's easy enough to pull it up. Okay, so cutting surfaces, squares, we've got that knocked out. On our cutting, now, cutting tools, the big point here is, you know what? Go with what's comfortable to you. That's the biggest point. I use a simple box knife right here, and we'll talk about the reasons behind that. But let's just touch on the high points here. So for lighter weight leathers, our chromes and our lighter weight veg tan, our art knives or craft knives, these are great, and I love these for the filigree and for putting in our spots. We've seen this, but notice we've got a shorter, more stout blade. These are not great for cutting leather. We absolutely can, but notice they're both a little flimsy. So if we're trying to cut, what we're going to do is get a little bit of a wave as we cut. Right here, rotary knife. For the lighter weights, for chromes, this is great. Look how easy that cuts. The blade actually rolls for us. But one thing I love about this, I love the guard. So therefore, I don't have an open blade on my table, but also round corners. That makes an easy cut of round corners. We can use this on the heavier weights. It's just not as effective. Ginger, scissors. In fact, that's a 9 to 10 ounce. Look at that. How easy does that cut? But again, we could cut thicker weights with that, but it's really going to tear up our hands as we try to cut the thicker weights. Now right here, round knife. Old school leather, absolutely. In fact, the folks that use this say once you go round, you'll never go back. It's actually 3 tools, so we can absolutely cut, but also we can edge. Let's jump back over to our veg. We can edge with this. Now, I'm not the best at this. There we go. So we can absolutely put in a beveled edge, and that's really not bad. I don't use a round knife often, but we can also skive with this. So that if we need to bring down, say, the end of our leather, maybe to a feather point, there we go. Look at that. We can absolutely do it. So it's a great knife to work with. One more, and I don't often see this. This is a trim knife. So let's see if I've got a good sample. I see this most often in, say, saddle shops. They're cutting large panels of thick leather. So what they'll do is they'll drop their pattern on the top grain, but then they'll come in from behind and cut. That is the #1 way to see what you're doing and where you're going. But for me, like I said, I love the box knife. I don't have to sharpen. That's not one of my strong points, sharpening a blade. So therefore, I can pop one of these in and out in about 30 seconds. Love the fact that I can retract that. In fact, I've gotten in the habit of when I sit this down, I just retract it. I don't have an open blade on my table. That to me can be a little worrisome. So therefore, we're going to go with a box knife to cut our project. I'm going to reset here, pull out our panel of leather. Let's cut our leather. We've got multiple ways to mark leather. This isn't really that difficult or too many options. We're going to go with a pen. Well, that's not the best route to go with, but we'll talk about that. Pencil, absolutely, we can mark leather with that. We can erase it, but really, just about any die we use is going to drown out any color left there. Here's a good scribe. This has got a ball point on one end and a sharp point on the other. Our scribe right here, yeah, we've already seen this. We'll use this throughout the entire project. But with a pen, first off, I want to be able to see what I'm cutting. A scribed line, not so easy, but also for camera. For on camera, we'll be able to see this easily. But the 2 points here, first off, if I mark this with a pen and I split that ink line, well, actually this panel is going to be just a little bit larger than the pattern, particularly if I do both sides. It can be as much as 1/8 of an inch off. But secondly, we're going to edge all the way around on every one of these. Actually, we'll trim here. So that pen, it's never going to stick around for us. So what I'm going to do, let's mark these 2 pieces right there. Try to be as efficient as we can. Good. Okay, let's back up because with everything we've talked about, I didn't go into our leather. Because we're going to tool, I'm going to use our Weaver Select. This is a 12-inch by 24-inch panel. The point there is we can get top quality leather without having to buy a full side. But I'm going to go this route because we're going to tool. Now, this is a 4 to 5 ounce. We're going to use a 4 to 5 ounce both for our main panel and our pocket, as well as our straps. Now with this pouch, I went with an 8 to 9 for our back piece. I wanted some good body there to hold that shape. Well, in all honesty, that just makes it a little too tough to bend around. So we're going to go with both 4 to 5. But again, we don't have to have multiple weights of leather in our shop to make this project. Okay, so we've got this worked out. Now, with our incline, let's cut just inside of that incline, and I'm going to cut both pieces out. But as always, new blade to start with. And if we do have a new blade, look how easy and clean that cut is. Just what we're looking for. Those pieces are cut. Good. In fact, let's go ahead and do our round corners on this piece. Good. Not bad for hand cut. Good, clean, round corners. Now, we're a little sharp on one of these corners, but this makes a good point. I always say use a new blade on every project. Look how little leather we can pull off of that. That is simply a sliver. So that's going to give us a good opportunity to get a very clean round corner. All right, we need our belt loops, last two pieces. Let's pull out our panel. Now, we can always go with a piece of bar stock, 1 inch wide. That's a fast way to cut. But also, we can measure out with our square 1 inch piece. Here's my favorite tool, one of the best tools in my shop. It's a wooden strap cutter. We can cut everywhere from 1/8 of an inch up to 4 inches. But if you're a pro shop and you really need to step up, look at this tool. This is unchanged in 200 years, but very cool point. We twist our handle. That's how we adjust for the width of our strap. Beautiful tool. But for the cost, right here. So I've got this set at 1 inch. Let's strap off 1 inch. How easy is that? Let's double check this width. Absolutely perfect. In fact, we could strap all the way across this piece, stack these up, and they would be exactly the same width. So, great tool in our shop. Okay, we need two at 6 inches here. Let's bust this right in the middle, and our project is cut. We're going to call it right there for this segment. So segment 2, let's create our tool design. When I first planned this series, segment 1 was supposed to be 8, maybe 10 minutes long. We've actually doubled that. But every time I would sit down and look at each step and think, maybe less on the project, but more on the tools and materials to help, they just came out of the woodwork. There are so many possibilities. But let's take that a step further. We're in Leathercraft. Unlimited designs, decorations, colors, hardware. There, literally sky is the limit. And I'm going to stop rolling right there. All right, segment 2. Let's create our tool design from scratch. I'm looking forward to the next 2 segments. I hope this is good information for you. Good luck with your projects.